Why, in your mind, do you believe that the kinds of views you have as a black person don't get traditional treatment in the general press?
I think because the views that I have, although they're like the views that you'll find in the black community, they're not like the views that you'll find among the black leadership. Those people, the leaders of organizations like the NAACP, people like Jesse Jackson, have a certain set of views which meets their needs, which do not meet the needs of black people. And the media have gotten used to turning to those people automatically when they want to know what do the blacks think. And so I'll see a succession of people on television saying things just the opposite of what blacks believe, as shown by innumerable polls. For example, most blacks have voted for vouchers, or in polls they've said they like vouchers. They've said that they don't like having their kids bused. They say that they want tighter, stronger control of crime because they're among the chief victims of crime, particularly murder. And yet, you'll find the black civil rights leaders going in just the opposite direction. They want to loosen crime control. They want to make it harder to convict people, easier for people to get loose. And in doing that, they're really following the lead of the white liberals rather than the actual sentiment in the black community.
What would Sterling Allen Brown want to say to Al Sharpton and the protesters in Ferguson today?
I don't know.
What would you say to them, to Al Sharpton and...
Well, I'm sure it couldn't be repeated on television, but I would say nothing, actually.
Why is that?
I am sure that Jesse Jackson makes 10 times as much money a year as I do. And I don't think I should take on the project of convincing somebody to reduce his income by 90%.
All right.
Is Jesse Jackson good for African Americans or not?
He's not. Good for himself.
Good for himself.
And that's true of most ethnic leaders in most groups, in most countries, in most periods of history. That what will serve his interest is to keep people paranoid, dependent upon him, dependent upon government. What will serve their interest is typically just the opposite.
That's pretty interesting. So you're saying that the leaders, whatever group, leader, wants the people to be poor and dependent on them as opposed to dependent on themselves.
Oh, absolutely. And you see this in the greatest cynicism in the academic world, where in many places, black organizations on campus have a say on who gets admitted. And they have turned down blacks with excellent credentials, both as students and as faculty members, for that very reason.
The Reagan administration inherited an economic nightmare. Record interest rates, a stagnant or declining real GNP growth, a hemorrhaging budget locked into vast and ever-growing deficits that have made double-digit inflation a way of life and $2 a gallon gasoline a distinct possibility. And with prices likely to double by 1988 at the double-digit pace of the Carter administration and more than 8 million Americans out of work, the general mood demanded that the ailing economy get first priority. President Reagan cannot ignore this reality. But as he slashes away at boondoggles and curbs spending, can he do so without hurting services to the people, the poor and those on fixed incomes in particular? This challenge will be further intensified by lingering doubts about Ronald Reagan that many blacks inherited from the presidential campaign, in which Jimmy Carter and his black surrogates warned against putting a warmongering racist in the White House.
The presence of black leaders in the position of power haven't led to the solution of systemic issues which are really happening in the black community. But why is this happening? I know you'll ask yourself the same question. Why is it that we say that we are not seeing black people into power? But then if we have black people into power, we're still facing the same problems. And literally black leaders who are put in power and then they align with, the enemies, or they executed things that went ahead and aligned with what the enemy wanted. So you'll be asking yourself, why is this still happening? Why is this still happening? Yet we know that if we have black leaders in power, it should be a solution to our problems. Why are we still having problems in the black community, even if we have black leaders in power? And that's a critical question that I think that we need to ask ourselves, because it is really, really important if we just try to think about it critically. We thought that if we put black people into power, if we put black people into positions, our problems will end, but it's not happening, So my appeal, just even before watching the video to you, is that regardless of any person you choose, get to know that they can always be subject to be corrupted. And it really happens, So whether you're choosing person A, whether you're choosing person B, whether you're choosing person C, without the unity of ourselves, we black people for black people, whether diasporans in Africa, whether black people in the United States, the only asset that we have, and this has proven for the longest time, it has proven that the solution is not putting black people into power because they are still subject to corruption, right? So the only unity that a black person has is what? The only unity that a black person has is we unify amongst ourselves. We support ourselves by ourselves, In Swahili word, we usually say sisi kwa sisi. It's us by us, It's we by we. There is nobody who is coming to save us. We need to save ourselves. That black leader that you think that will save you, they'll get there in power. They'll forget about you. So what can we do amongst ourselves? I know political stance or political, your civic right, practicing voting, it's really, really important. But at least sometimes we choose people thinking that people who will serve us, that the people will think about what we want, that the people that they resonate with us. But then we being slapped by a big surprise to realize that we don't share even the same sentiments. We don't share the same struggles, because when a person gets into power, I usually don't know what happens. But then before they get into power, they'll promise you everything that they want to promise you. And trust me, this is not far much away with what's happening in the motherland Africa. Look at what our leaders are doing. They're kissing the asses of the oppressors, Same to us. And this has proven that choosing people who are close to us, some of these people are our relatives, but when they get into power, they forget us. And it's not even about being a relative. What is your role as a leader? What did people choose you to do? So this is something that we, people from the black community, we need to, think deeply about it. What can we do for ourselves? That's what we need to think, because it has proven for the longest time that having leaders that look like you, that doesn't mean that your problems will be solved. So join me today in today's presentation. This is Eugene Tech Stories, and if you're watching this video for the first time, I'll ask you to subscribe to my channel, join my membership, and really get to see what I can offer you. Until then, I don't have much to say. I'll be giving my critical analysis at the end of the video. This is Dr. Sowell. He is a philosopher, political commentator, and he has talked about a number of things which are happening in the black community, and it's really, really important that the new generation, Generation Z, like me and maybe you are watching, and other group of people, we need to realize that these figures in the public are really, really important. And it's important if we try to teach our young ones to also get to learn this knowledge. It's really, really important. Now, here the perspective of Dr. Sowell. What he says that choosing black leaders doesn't mean that that's the end of black problems. Now, let's dive right into the video. I'll be back with my commentary.
Although Carter modified his initially harsh statements that Reagan would divide blacks from whites, Jews and Christians, and North and South, and disassociated himself from Andrew Young's charge that a Reagan victory would be interpreted as a signal to, quote, kill, the damage was done. The fact is that President Reagan has inherited a nasty relationship with the nation's blacks. The result is a hair-trigger race psychology, poised to respond in unfavorable ways to the slightest hint of racist policies. This climate of what's now referred to black hysteria, the fact that the black community is just immobilized out of the fear that Ronald Reagan's administration is, quote, going to steal, snatch the great gains of the 60s and set black people back. Do you share that point of view?
I think that the people who are saying that may lose some of the gains that they have made in terms of federal grants that support their six-figure salaries. I find no hysteria in the black community about it. I know of no reason for the hysteria. The man, after all, is not a newcomer to politics. He was governor for 8 years of one of the most multiracial, multi-ethnic states in the country. And if anything faintly resembling this had happened, he would never have been reelected.
What is your reaction to what came to be known as black hysteria?
Well, I think one thing, it's of course totally at odds with Ronald Reagan's record prior to becoming president, and I think now that he is president already, we have seen what his approach is, that he feels personally that he is president of all the people, and that he is very responsive both to the needs and the concerns of black people along with others. I guess what does disturb me, not from the standpoint of this administration as much as from society in general, is that I think there are those people who are fomenting black hysteria in order to preserve their own positions in their communities and their own positions of so-called leadership.
How will you decide which black leaders you're going to deal with, and how do you determine who a black leader is?
Well, you know, this is one of the problems, and I think it's one of the things that a conference that was held last month in San Francisco illustrated very well, and that is the idea that, like any society or any portion of society, there is no monolithic black community that can be represented by one or even any group of leaders. We're talking about Ronald Reagan really talking to black people, leaders in the black community certainly, but no one of them or even any group of them being able to speak for black people as a whole. And I think that's one of the things he recognizes very clearly. Because right now the major problems of this country, the economy and energy particularly, impact poor people of all races, whether they be black or white, much more than they do the rest of us.
Although Ed Meese, formerly Reagan's campaign chief, will have the cabinet-level status of counselor to the president, he is the closest person to President Reagan, helping to set the tone and priorities of the administration. During the transition period, he was, in effect, Reagan's public substitute, when, as the joke goes, the 6 most repeated words in Washington were, "I just talked with Ed Meese."
And then there are specific problems in which the black community has a special stake. And I agree, as was mentioned earlier, that we have to make sure that there is financial support for the black colleges, and we have to make sure that the zealous demons of the Department of Education are not doing things in the, you know, there's nothing worse than a person who goes out to do good works to you. And we want to make sure that the Department of Education, in their zeal to carry out all their regulatory powers and find a few more to tack on to justify their existence, where there's very little justification, that they don't get involved in trying to undo what has built up as a great tradition of black colleges over the years. Rather than just taking the traditional pattern, the old kind of thinking that's saying, no, if we have vouchers or if we have this change or that change, blacks are somehow going to suffer. Instead, there are some enlightened leaders, Tom Sowell for one, Walter Williams and others, who say, look, blacks can be on the cutting edge of new ideas. We can be the ones who are proposing new ideas that will help the entire population but will also help blacks.
One of our dear friends, Tom Sowell.
This is really an historic opportunity. The economic and social advancement of blacks in this country is still a great unfinished task. The methods and approaches for dealing with this task have become familiar over the past few years, and they demand re-examination for at least 2 reasons. First is the effectiveness of these approaches has been ever more seriously questioned in recent years. There's growing factual evidence of counterproductive results from noble intentions. Some of that factual evidence will be presented here tomorrow. In addition, numerous political trends in recent years indicate declining voter and taxpayer support for these approaches to which some of the older and more conventional black spokesmen, in quotes, remain committed. The events of November 4th were only the most dramatic example of this. They were not the only example. What are some of the pluses and minuses of our present situation? On the plus side, a dramatic economic rise of blacks during the 1960s, but which has slowed, in some cases stopped, in the 1970s. Many social problems are worsening. Continued disintegration of families, rising numbers of broken homes, 1/3 of all black homes now. A skyrocketing unemployment rate among black youths, 5 times as high in the late 1970s as in the late 1940s. Runaway crime rates, of which blacks are the chief victims. There are more blacks murdered every year than whites in absolute numbers. There's also a threat of a permanent underclass whose problems seem immune to prosperity, to equal opportunity, or to the advancement experienced by other blacks. We can see on the horizon the rise of racist groups such as the Nazis, the KKK,
not only among the benighted, ignorant, but in places where you would never expect such groups, where they never had a foothold before. We can at least ask whether or to what extent the policies of our times have contributed to these problems of our time. Looking ahead to the future, one of the things that we need to focus on are facts about results, not rhetoric about intentions. We need to look not at the noble preambles of legislation, but at the incentives created in that legislation. Very often legislation intended to help the disadvantaged, in fact, pay people to stay disadvantaged, penalize them to the extent that they make an effort to rise from disadvantage. One of the problems in dealing with the politics of poverty and the programs for the disadvantaged in general, and blacks in particular, is that vast empires can be built on these programs. That these programs definitely prevent poverty among bureaucrats, economists, statisticians, and many others. I think that what this betrays is a sense, a sort of proprietary conception of blacks, somewhat at variance with the spirit of the 13th Amendment. I think that if insofar as we're going to enlist the intelligence, the desires, and the commitments of blacks themselves, we have to do so by offering more choice in more areas, to let them decide what is best for themselves and not to turn that job over to academics and government officials. Thank you.
Dr. Thomas Sowell, an economist and senior fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution, is the most prominent black policymaker and has drawn the most criticism from the professional civil rights leaders because he disagrees with some of their favored solutions, including busing and the minimum wage. But the Reagan people see him as the kind of black who understands how to design programs that help the economy and blacks at the same time. I want to talk to you about a variety of your views, but first of all, I'd like to know why, in your mind, do you believe that the kinds of views you have as a black person don't get traditional treatment in the general press?
I think because the views that I have, although they're like the views that you'll find in the black community, they're not like the views that you'll find among the black leadership. Those people, the leaders of organizations like the NAACP, people like Jesse Jackson, have a certain set of views which meets their needs, which does not meet the needs of black people. And the media have gotten used to turning to those people automatically when they want to know what do the blacks think. And so I'll see a succession of people on television saying things just the opposite of what blacks believe, as shown by innumerable polls. For example, most blacks have voted for vouchers, or been polled, they've said they like vouchers. They've said that they don't like having their kids bused. They say that they want tighter, stronger control of crime because they are among the chief victims of crime, particularly murder. And yet you'll find the black civil rights leaders going in just the opposite direction. They want to loosen crime control. They want to make it harder to convict people, easier for people to get loose. And in doing that, they're really following the lead of the white liberals rather than the actual sentiment in the black community. The black population has never given a majority in favor of forced busing in any poll that's been taken over the past several years, or at any time that I know of. Very few people want their children bused across town to teach bigots a lesson. They want their kids bused across town if there's going to be some better education there. But you get people who are crusaders, they want someone else's kids bused. Their kids are never bused, whether it's blacks or whites, NAACP lawyers, liberal judges, congressmen, whatnot. Their kids are never bused. It's always someone else's kids they want to experiment with. Most parents don't want their kids experimented with. They want them educated. And you get in farcical situations like those in Boston, where numerous black community organizations asked the judge not to bust their kids. He bused them anyway. He bused them from Roxbury, where the standards were higher, to South Boston, where they were lower. So even if they had been welcomed with open arms in South Boston, it would still have been a disaster because the South Boston educational standards are lower than those in the ghetto. Of course, they weren't welcomed with open arms. They were welcomed with bottles and bricks and everything else. But it was just a tragedy. But it shows what blindness people can persist in when they don't pay the cost. That judge has paid no cost whatsoever for having done that.
Because of some of the views that you take, which are considered by the professional civil rights leaders who are traditional Democrats, they say that you are insensitive, and they're concerned that if you become a prominent person in the Reagan administration, that you will harm black people. And one NAACP official is quoted as saying the following, quote, "He," referring to you, "would play the same kind of role which historically the house played for the plantation owners. He could mete out the straight discipline, no matter how inhumanely administered. It would be presumed more acceptable because the hands of the disciplinarian are black," end of quote.
Pure this kind of contemptible business is typical of what you find among people who have no arguments, no facts, no evidence, and who simply have to defend themselves in the positions they've taken. I think the NAACP itself is much more in the image of the House, that they are simply the end of the civil rights of the liberal white establishment. They follow wherever the head leads, and if that leads them to destroy opportunities for blacks, they do it because that keeps them in with the white philanthropists who support them, the white media who back them up in the editorial columns and elsewhere. It's typical of the kind of garbage to which they're reduced by the lack of anything better that they can offer.
Why do you take an organization as powerful as the NAACP on? Why are you flying in the face of the group that America has chosen to represent black people?
Well, the question is whether America has chosen them or whether black people have chosen them. There's never been a referendum among black people saying that whoever is head of the NAACP will speak for them, or head of the Urban League or any other organization. I think it's laziness on the part of the media that they need to get 4 or 5 black views in a hurry before a deadline. They can call up 2 or 3 people and find out what all blacks are supposed to be thinking.
The election of President Reagan also spells the revitalization of Reverend Hosea Williams and Reverend Ralph Abernathy, once powerful civil rights leaders and early followers of Martin Luther King. Their endorsement of Ronald Reagan, although attracting a lot of criticism for them, was a big plus for Reagan's candidacy. Reverend Williams.
And to sit by and see Jimmy Carter elected again, to me, would have been betrayal of my country, my people. And black people are going to be poor until they die, or until they themselves decide they're not going to be poor any longer. It's a matter of doing for self. The answer to our problems is not without, it's within. Most of the leaders today are truly not interested in the welfare of the masses of the people. They're interested in that little specific thing, ballot organization, and Jimmy Carter played it for what it was worth. Jimmy Carter firmly believed if I take care of the chiefs, all the Indians will fall in line.
How will you use your influence differently from the professional leaders that you're so critical of?
Well, we made it very plain to Mr. Reagan from the inception that we have no desire as blacks to replace that black clique Carter had in Washington, D.C. I made it plain that I do not want to be Reagan's Andrew Young. What we did ask Mr. Reagan, will we have his ear once he's elected? We would like to serve as the ears and eyes of developing a consensus of black opinion. So what we are saying to Mr. Reagan, we don't believe that Jimmy Carter's black clique was honest with him. They went and told Carter what they wanted him to hear. They didn't tell him what black America wanted him to hear.
Does President Reagan want to build bridges to blacks? The first hint to the correct answer to that question was a conference initiated by this man, Dr. Henry Lucas, and sponsored by the Institute for Contemporary Studies, a part of the Reagan-aligned Hoover Institution, which claims Ed Meese as a director and President Reagan as a founder. Dr. Lucas was appointed president of the California State Board of Dental Examiners by Reagan when he was governor.
When we conceived this conference, we conceived it with the idea that if someone did not give President-elect Reagan some other alternative, that he was going to be forced to do business with the same old crowd, and that would have been disastrous. And so we conceived putting on this conference. This conference has exceeded my wildest imaginations. There are many of us out there who want to re-examine the old solutions that have failed. And there are many of us out there who have these feelings but have maybe been afraid to speak out because we're going to be ostracized by the quote-unquote leadership, such as the Jacksons, etc. So it's brought about a community of people that are no longer feel alone. And that's going to be very important and what happened not only in America, but in black America in terms of our coming together from within to solve our problems.
No one admitted or denied the fact that the conference was the Reagan administration's early attempt to get in touch with the kind of black thinking that will create policy. A growing number of blacks, not just black Republicans, are questioning the white liberal and civil rights orthodoxy customarily associated with minorities. Judging from the initiatives of the Reagan administration, some of these blacks will help reshape the role of government on minority issues.
And we hope that how we act will benefit black Americans.
Reagan's interest in the results of the conference was reflected in the fact that he sent his top aide. In his formal remarks before the Conference on Black Leadership and Alternatives, Meese compared an earlier meeting with the old-line civil rights leaders and those blacks at the San Francisco conference. He said, "The difference between that meeting and this conference here is that they were talking about the last 10 years and the ideas of the last 10 years. You're talking about the ideas of the next 10 years." One of the allegations made against President Reagan by the blacks who were supporting President Carter, then President Carter, was that if President Reagan did get elected and did balance the budget, that he would do so on the backs of the poor.
Well, nothing could be farther from the truth. The one thing that Ronald Reagan has said from the start is that in his presidency, the budget will not be balanced at the expense of poor people, whether they be black, white, or whatever background they might come from. And I think that certainly has been true so far. Programs for the needy have a very high, if not the highest, priority with this administration. At the same time, I think everyone would agree, or most people would agree at least, that where there is fraud, where there is waste, where there is abuse, no matter who it's committed by, that it isn't proper for taxpayers' dollars to be used to support that kind of extravagance, that kind of waste. And so it's a matter, really, of making sure that the dollars that the taxpayers allocate to help the truly needy, those people who cannot help themselves, are used for that purpose and not used for illegitimate purposes.
Government over the past 20 or 30 years has destroyed more than twice as much housing as it's built. When they want to build a highway to let people come in from the suburbs, they build it through the low-income neighborhoods. They don't tear down Beverly Hills in order for people to watch to go drive through and get to their jobs. They don't tear down Malibu for the same reason. They tear down Harlem, they tear down the black neighborhoods in Washington so people can come in from Maryland to work faster. So that the government in many areas makes things far worse for blacks than they were before.
Does government exploit black people?
Well, in the sense that they use poor people sort of as a stalking horse to get programs started. We're going to do this or that for the benefit of the poor. And it's true, initially there'll be a few crumbs for the poor, but then the program balloons up to 10 times its original size. And most of those other 90% turn out to be people who aren't poor at all. In New York City, for example, the open enrollment policy at the municipal colleges were justified on the grounds that poor blacks and Hispanics needed to get into these schools. And under that grounds, they opened up the colleges without regard to qualifications. The net result was a few blacks and Hispanics got in, and an enormous number of people who were neither black, nor Hispanic, nor poor were able to pull out of NYU, where they were paying some very high tuition, out of Long Island University, which had to close down a whole campus because of the withdrawals, and they enrolled at the taxpayers' expense in the municipal colleges. This game has been played many times with many programs. This is for the poor. When it's all over, someone else has got the money.
One of the traditional civil rights leaders, I think the head of the NAACP, after a meeting with a group of other blacks and President Reagan, said that President Reagan said that he would defend civil rights, quote, even at the edge of the bayonet or something to that effect.
Right.
Is that an accurate statement? And what do you feel the president had in mind when he said that?
Well, I was there at the meeting, and he said that he would defend civil rights to the point of a bayonet if necessary. And what he was saying is that the law enforcement and, in effect, the power of government should be used to protect the civil rights of any individual against those who would encroach upon those civil rights. Let me say this about Ronald Reagan. He has a record of opposing prejudice and bigotry that goes all the way back to his boyhood, through college, through his work in sports, as a sports broadcaster, and in the movies, and obviously since that time as he entered political life. And so there's no doubt in my mind that he will probably be one of the most active defenders of civil rights as a president of anyone we've ever had. And he will not hesitate at all to use the full powers of his office for any citizen who is where someone is attempting to deprive that person of his or her civil rights.
What happens now? And if I may quote the eloquent Percy Sutton again, we have an opportunity. Thank you.
Despite the attacks on blacks who support new solutions to the problems of the black and poor communities, the number of blacks who dissent from the customary white liberal and professional black leader solutions is increasing. And they represent a cross-section of professions and political persuasions. Results and power have more meaning to them than racist rhetoric and campaigns to promote mass hysteria. The poor and black have always had a greater stake in economic and political progress than in programs that promise a seat next to a white person. Where the goals of the Republican Party and the black community converge, we should share the burden. We all want to improve the economy, national security, and our international prestige. We also need a president of all of the people, not just those who voted for him, who will contend with the aspirations of the minority poor, many of whom didn't vote for anyone, who inhabit the largest and most important cities. And speaking of urban areas, there's one noteworthy fact. There is a rising resentment of poor blacks to their deteriorating condition. Too many of the old planners were preoccupied with superficial things like busing and not the overall backsliding in the economic condition of the people. There's also a kind of intellectual fascism loose in the black community. It condemns any black as an Uncle Tom who disagrees with white liberals or the group self-designated as black leaders. Economic independence for black America certainly has not been achieved by the old solutions. And court-ordered desegregation has not stopped economic inequality.
So remember one important thing that I've said. Choosing black people or putting black people into power, that doesn't mean that this is the end of black problems. And that's the truth. It doesn't mean this is the end of black problems, because the people that we choose, they later on go and forget, or I don't know what happens, you know. So the presence of black leaders in positions of power has not necessarily led to the resolution of systemic issues faced today by black Americans, or African Americans, or black people in the United States. These are the reasons as to why it hasn't been, you know, possible. And Dr. Sowell says it very clearly, and uses people like Jesse Jackson. And we can look back, President Obama, you know, and other people that we have always talked about, you know. So amongst other reasons that why are we still having these systemic issues? Yet we thought that if we choose black people, they'll be one of the solutions that we have as black people, you know. So amongst the things that I came to see was systemic barriers and oppositions, you know. So when black leaders attain power, they often face significant resistance from entrenched systems of power that are designed to maintain the status quo. The systems include political institutions, economic structures, and social norms that are resistant to change, making it difficult for black leaders to implement transformative policies. And this is true, you know, systemic barriers and oppositions amongst other things, you know, because the corporations, you know, the corporate controls the government. The corporate even has the power to give money to the government. So when they have the power to give money to the government, when you are chosen as a leader, you are also in the government. So they'll dictate how they want you to treat your group. They'll dictate how they want you to respond to things. And you realize that these are not things which are resonating with people who are coming from, you know, the same community. You know what I'm saying? So these are one of the things which happen. Amongst them, we talked about the systemic barriers, you know. So making it difficult for black leaders to implement transformative policies, things that resonates with black people across every part of the world, right? So another reason that I also came to say, and I agree, because I think Dr. Sowell also touches upon this, is cooptation. What is cooptation? You know, so some black leaders may be co-opted by the very systems they seek to change. This means that they may start out with strong intentions to address issues affecting black communities, but end up aligning with the interest of political or economic elites. This can result in the prioritizing the maintenance of power and position over the needs of their constituents. You know what I'm saying? So in other terms, you're being neutralized. You're being made to align with everything that, you know, everything that the enemy needs, or everything that they need you to do. That's what they come to do. So cooptation is also amongst other things that they use to neutralize you. I'm using as a layman's statement, that's what is called the cooptation. So we have these aggressive black leaders that when they are in power, they start advocating for things that black leaders or black people, they share the sentiments that black people go through, you know. be calling out the violence and everything, the critical government which is happening. And then after some time, you realize that things are happening in the black community, maybe things which are really, really critical. But when they are asked the opinion as one of the black leaders, they say that the relevant authorities are going to follow up with this, and then they just get quiet about it. They are not aggressive, as in the same way they enter. This is because they have been threatened to lose power, or they have been neutralized, or they have been offered some things that, if you align with us, these are the things that are going to happen. So the third one is limited power and resources. Even when black leaders are in power, they are often have limited control over the broad economic and political system. The lack of resources they need to compromise with the powerful groups and the constraints of the political system can limit their ability to affect substantial change. Just like I've said in my first point, the corporate, they have the power because they even have the money to lend the government. So while you are in power, they'll dictate everything. This means that you have limited power. They have the resources. A resource is power. A resource is big part of power because they can just say that we are not going to give you any money. So if you don't comply with what we want, we're not going to give you any money. And no money they're going to give you unless you align with them. So you as a black person, you look back and say that, I gotta do this for my family, I gotta do this. So with that, you'll find yourself aligning with them. And I think that most of black leaders are falling into these pitfall trap. I'm also going to talk about targeting and undermining. So historically, black leaders who have been vocal or effective in advocating for radical change have often been targeted for character assassination, legal challenges, or even assassination. The undermining of such leaders serves as warning to others and can stifle efforts to address systemic issues. It's been happening for the longest time. The threats, the blackmails, being told that, you have your family. Do you love your family more than you love your citizen? So you'll be the one to choose. So they'll always be targeting the vulnerable parts of you as a leader. So when they know where they can eat you, and then they want to make sure that you back down a little bit. So when you back down a little bit, that means that you've conformed with what they want. And when you conform with what they want, that now they won't even realize, or they won't hear what people from the black community, their sentiments, because now you started by advocating for what people wanted. But then it doesn't happen. But there is power. There is collective power in people who are together. There is power in people who are together. There is easier to make a revolution when we have a group of people who work together. So revolution is much way easier when you have people who work together, when you have people who stand with one voice and say that we don't want to do this to you. We don't want you to do this to us. And we can do this to us, instead of choosing a leader who is going to trample in front of these people. Come together as a group. Stand together, stand tall, fight. That's the only solution that we people have. We have one voice, and this one voice we're going to be sharing out. We're going to be airing out in different places. That's the only power that we have, and that's what I'm going to say. So that's where targeting and undermining can be stopped. And I'm also going to be talking about expectation versus reality as amongst one of the things that happen to people from the black community, or the leaders that black people choose, as they think that they're going to be the solution to the problems or to the systemic issues which are happening in the United States, right? So there is often a disconnect between the expectation placed in black leaders and what they realistically achieve. The community may expect quick and significant changes, but systemic issues take time and sustained efforts to address. When change is slow and incremental, it leads to disillusionment. I understand. So sometimes it takes time. It really takes time for these black leaders to navigate and find platforms or find systems that they can, try to address these issues or try to solve these problems. So it might not just happen overnight. So if we are expecting leaders to get into power and then 2 months, boom, it's definitely almost impossible to achieve that, but it is possible with unity. And that's what I always say. With unity, the black people, we can always achieve this, and it is very, very possible. Trust me when I say so. So I'm also going to be talking about internal division. Internal division. Now, this is one of the problems that we black people we are having. One, we are having self-hate amongst ourselves. So having self-hate amongst ourselves, it means that we are not going to prioritize what we black people need amongst ourselves. If we are talking about unity, we are not going to see people or black people who are going to unify, you know. That's why they say not all skin folks are kinfolks, right? So not that I look like you, I have the same sentiments like you. Not that because I look like you, I have the same goals, I have the same plans like you know what I'm saying? So internal division, black leaders, like leaders of any group, may face internal division within their communities. The disagreements of strategy, ideology, and goals can fragment the movement for change and reduce the overall effectiveness of leadership, as amongst other things that I've talked about. So we need to understand that some of us are struggling with self-hate, and I understand we have a long way to get out of this. We have a long way to fight out of this, right? So all in all, what we need is unity amongst ourselves. If we can just unify, if we can just say no, and we are going to have a revolution, we are going to solve this problem once and for all, that's when we are going to see things which are changing. That was my 2 cents in what Dr. Thomas Sowell was trying to say in this video. If you really liked the video, and if you watched until this point, I really ask you to subscribe to the channel, join our membership, and really get to see what we can offer you. Until then, let's meet in my next video. Peace, love, and reparations. Salute.